Just about everything you read and watch about childhood trauma is about how terrible it is, how damaged you are, how bad the people who did this to you are. And it's not that they weren't bad or that you weren't damaged, but you have to be very careful consuming all that negative focus, all that backward focus, when the person you are now is crying to change. Because you can't get from the damage of what happened to you to the freedom and joy of becoming your real self by only focusing on the trauma. You are more than your trauma. What happened to you was terrible. It was wrong. It hurt you. But now, even though it's wobbly, you have freedom. And you can begin your healing and make your life yours at last. You begin when you shift some of the focus from the past and bring it into present time, into the control of the only person who can change your life now, which is you, right here in present time. Now, all my videos and courses and coaching, they're about how you make this change, how you identify the symptoms, the neurological changes that you go through when something hurts you or triggers you in present time, and how you begin to heal. But today, I want to talk about what you will notice in yourself when these wonderful changes are taking place. This is the most important part of what I'm teaching, and I go over these signs every so often to make sure that you and everyone who watches my videos gets to hear them so that they can be like a beacon for you. They can be a light that you follow when you're in a dark period of your life. Let these signs of healing be like a North Star for you and go in that direction. Okay? Now, you've heard me talk about all the self-defeating behaviors that are common for people with CPTSD. These are the things we struggle to stop doing at first that can re-traumatize us. They take the old childhood traumas and activate them again. If you haven't seen the video where I go through some of those, I'll put a link at the end of this video, so stay with me for that part. What I'm going to tell you now is what it looks like when those trauma-driven habits fall away, which they will. Now, maybe you're at the point, or maybe you're not there yet. There's not time in my video to, cover everything that I teach in my programs, but I want to plant legitimate hope in your heart that you can and should look forward to healing these common ways that people with childhood PTSD traumatize themselves. We do this. And I teach this because, for me, this was the hardest part of healing. And I mean, yes, the stuff that happened to me when I was a child was bad. But in the end, it was the stuff I did to myself, the bad relationships, the chain smoking, lashing out at people. If you've taken my courses, you know my story. But I wasn't getting better for a really long time when I was trying to get better because of all the hurtful situations I was putting myself into and dragging other people into. And then I changed. And it's not like I'm all perfect now. I'm a work in progress, just like everyone. But if you're stuck in a pattern, just like I was, I get it. I understand, and I'm here to show you a better way, okay? So you want to hear some of the signs when you're healed from traumatizing yourself anymore? Okay, you're not going to have all of these, but you can see if you relate to some of them. One is, when your trauma is healing, you will no longer tend to see things in black and white terms. People, yourself, situations. You will no longer hold them up as all good or put them down as all bad. And you'll begin to appreciate the complexity of things and the way people can have faults, but still be decent people anyway. And you'll have less outrage and more curiosity about other points of view. You'll have less impatience and more persistence, and you'll lose the attraction to extreme views or authority figures and gain the ability to interact with a variety of people and educate yourself. And relationships where one person dominates will become more equal, or they'll fade away, and it will be less necessary to cut people out of your life. So think of all the struggle you've had in the past around these problems and how good it will feel to be free. Number 2 is you'll have a natural desire to care for your body. And part of it is because you'll have less drama and more energy to do things like take a walk, floss your teeth, or shop for clothes that actually look good on you. And you'll feel a little better. And so now when you're feeling too schlumpy to leave the house, or you're tired from watching TV till after midnight, it's going to feel not worth it anymore. It will become more possible to face your addictions and to take action so that you overcome them. One little step after another will lead to more clarity, more enthusiasm for life, and you'll want to do more good things for yourself. It feeds on itself. All right. Number 3 is, this is another one where an old behavior will start to just feel awful, and that's around the way that you eat. Being at the effect of past trauma can lead to everything from obesity and eating disorders to a tendency to deal with stress by binging on high carbohydrate foods and sugar, or not eating at all. Now, the high carb foods can be calming at first, but dysregulating in the long run. And as you heal, you're not going to want that feeling. And in fact, if sugar and carbs are your weak spot, they are mine, you might want to check out Bright Line Eating. I've got a link to that down below in the description section for anybody who wants to find it. It's a nice way of eating that's very flexible, and I find really helps with dysregulation. Number 4 is you'll lose that compulsive desire to binge on TV and video games and just plain looking at your phone all the time. And if you're someone who has been into that stuff enough to interfere with your sleep or meals or your job performance or your ability to be present with the people in your life, then the release from screen addiction is going to be life-changing for you. And I know I have to look at a screen to say this to you, and you have to look at a screen to hear it. But everything in moderation, all right? Number 5, you'll notice this big sign that you're not re-traumatizing yourself anymore when you aren't tempted anymore to fudge the truth. This is things like exaggerating, hiding important information about yourself, or even lying about things. And part of the reason is there will be nothing that you need to hide or feel ashamed about. You won't have so many problems when you've healed from your trauma. So you'll be comfortable being more honest about what's going on in your life. But it's also because just being real, being honestly yourself, it feels better. And you'll start to have discomfort. You know, it just doesn't feel good when you're not being real. You'll actually want the truth to filter through your life. And if there's anyone still in your life who can't handle who you really are and how you really feel, then that's okay. Maybe they're not meant to be there. And maybe when they're gone, even though saying goodbye will be sad, there's going to be a big, nice space where someone who loves you and accepts you just as you are can be. All right, number 6. An important sign that you're healing from trauma is that your work life will start to go better. You won't stay stuck in unfulfilling work. You're going to change your relationship to that job or get a new one. And if a lack of work has been your problem, all the good changes happening will make it easier to get work and earn money that supports you and all the people who count on you. Now, you'll know how to steer clear of exploitative or abusive employers. You'll lose your appetite for conflicts on the job, and you'll gain the ability to show up, do good work, be an encourager of your coworkers, and an advocate for yourself and your ideas when you need to. All right. The 7th sign that you're done re-traumatizing yourself is that you'll lose interest in assigning blame to yourself or other people for problems, and instead focus on finding good solutions. You'll feel less angry, less irritable, and when something is your fault, it'll be easier to just own it and apologize. And when someone else owes you an apology, but they don't give it to you, you won't dwell on it. Blamey news and social media also, it's just, those posts are just going to start to put a bad taste in your mouth. And people in your life may not know why, but they're going to feel better around themselves when they're around you. Number 8, a big sign that your trauma is really healing now is that any attraction you once had to unavailable partners and troubling friends will let go of you. I talk a lot about this in all my videos about healing relationships, but so much life damage is done by this one self-defeating behavior, connecting and bonding with and staying with people who are trouble, or avoiding any kind of intimacy with people at all, even though it's what you long for. Or you might be abusing intimacy by acting out sexually, which is still a way of having no intimacy. Now, this is one part of CPTSD that can be hard to heal just by deciding to change. It cuts to the very heart of that trauma wound. But when you've made real progress in other areas, it'll be easier to stop re-traumatizing yourself in the area of your life where sex and romance are. The spell gets broken and there is peace when you're single and the possibility of harmony and real love when you do meet someone. The 9th sign is this: you start to prefer reality to fantasy. And the tendency to check out by spending too much time in a limerent fantasy romance or in a fantastical business idea, picture that you're dreaming about but not acting on. And this is really common for people who are going through a trauma right now. But after time, it's just another way to avoid real problems and the actions that you need to take to solve them and move forward. Now, when you're healing, it feels less necessary to fantasize. And when you catch yourself daydreaming, you can come back where you can actually connect with people and put your goals into action, which is here and now. That's a good thing. And finally, number 10, your material well-being starts to come together in a positive way. Most people in the world, including most happy people, live good lives without being rich and famous, and some live on very little money at all. Financial hardship can fall on anyone, but when you're free of trauma, it's more possible to earn a steady income, to let go of, get-rich-quick schemes, to live within your means, to release the fear of the past when maybe you were always a few $100s away from homelessness. I've been there before, and it can limit you. It all gets better all together at the same time, a little here, a little there. And when you're healing all this stuff, you can sleep at night, you can handle hard days, you can hold your head up even though you make mistakes because you're not sabotaging yourself in ways that make you ashamed. This is what healing feels like when you're not re-traumatized all the time. So don't get discouraged. There are things you can do to start healing right now. It's estimated that about 15% of the population was traumatized as a kid. Depends how you classify trauma. But most of those people don't know they have it. People do notice they have symptoms. They're probably working on it. They're talking about it. They're trying to get better. But most people with CPTSD are just suffering with it. They're trying to get better, but they're not. Now, you might be someone who's lived your whole life afraid that you're going to become one of those people, stuck in trauma, never being happy or loved or fulfilled or financially stable. And that is, in fact, a risk that comes with CPTSD, especially if you don't find anything that helps you. And I get it. It's hard to know when you're first starting out on your healing what is going to help you. But if you give up and you don't try, you're even more at risk to get stuck. Or maybe you've tried some approaches to healing from trauma, but you kind of only, did it halfway, or you have known what steps would help you and change your life, but you haven't found the power inside to keep moving forward. And I want to talk about this today to encourage you to take your healing seriously, to double down on it so that you can heal. And I'm going to lay out 10 things that you can do. And if you're ready to move forward with that right now, obviously, not all of them are going to apply to you. But these are 10 things that help me and that I teach to all the people in my coaching programs. When you've heard everything that I'm going to lay out in this video, you can pick 1 or 2 action items that are most important to you, and you can start implementing them today. And I would encourage you to take the ones that, like if you didn't heal them, would actually cause you the most pain based on what's caused pain in the past. And of those, also ask yourself, what's actually fixable for you right now? So something that's important to you and something that can be fixed. And that will give you like a little win fairly quickly in the healing process. And that is definitely helpful when you're sitting there looking at a whole bunch of things you think that maybe you should change about your life. Get something that's important and fixable so that you have that feeling of like, there, 1 down. And that is shown to be very helpful to people who are trying to stick with a process. Healing from trauma requires some persistence. Okay, so here are the 10 things. Number 1, learn what complex PTSD is, not just what you've heard on the internet, not just what other people say about it, and not focusing all your energy on what might be the diagnosis of other people who are in your story. That's not the same thing as understanding what's going on with your brain and learning about your brain and about brain dysregulation and what that does to you and about emotional dysregulation and re-regulation and what a difference that can make. How does that impact your life? We didn't know until very recently that CPTSD is an injury to your brain and nervous system. And a lot of therapists and clinical professionals still don't know this. It's really important that you educate yourself so that you can choose professional help well based on people who get it, and so that you can make decisions on your healing that's, based on current knowledge and not old ideas. Number 2, when you look at yourself and how you're doing with your healing process, be willing to notice some of the problems that maybe have nothing to do with trauma. Now, it's true, CPTSD can make it hard to focus. It can make it hard to be consistent, to be as kind and considerate as you want to be. And it might make it hard to stay present. CPTSD might almost certainly has damaged relationships in your life. It might have damaged your health as well. Okay, so all those things are trauma related, but everybody has a couple of problems that are just kind of ordinary human problems. So it could be something like, maybe you're often late. A lot of people struggle with that. You don't have to be traumatized to be somebody who's chronically late. Trauma could be implicated, but sometimes that's one of the things that you just have, It's just something you're doing right now. And the reason I love the problems that are just normal person problems is because they're a little easier to solve. You don't have to heal your brain necessarily to get that going. It could be that you need to keep your kitchen cleaner, that the whole kitchen smells like garbage all the time, and when people come over, you're ashamed. And I know how trauma can drive that kind of procrastination, but it's a solvable problem. And I love low-hanging fruit problems, things that you can solve quickly and get another little win. A little win, you start feeling confident that you can take on another project for healing. Okay. Number 3, prepare to move your stories about the abuse and neglect that happened to you out of present time looping thoughts and into what I call the memory bucket. If you can imagine, there's a bucket, there's your present time thinking, and there is a memory bucket. So there's everything going on in your mind now. CPTSD can trap your emotional and body reactions from old traumatic experiences and then keep them looping in your mind as if they're happening right now. That's why it's so hard to have CPTSD. It's a different thing than a memory. It's activating all your adrenaline, your cortisol, it speeds your heart rate, it scatters your thoughts and puts your whole body in a state of stress. So it makes it really hard to stop thinking about it or reacting to it. That's what I call looping, or I call it an electric thought. It's very charged. What you want is to have access to your thoughts and memories, but not to be controlled by them, not to, get physiologically changed every time they pop into your awareness. An ordinary memory has the trauma element deactivated. It's not electric. It's unplugged. You can remember it, and if anybody asks you a question about it, you can remember all the same details about it, but it doesn't trigger this huge physiological and neurological response in you. If you had trauma, you probably have some looping electric thoughts that give you very charged reactions, and you probably have some memories that are not charged. So when I say get ready, one thing that will help you is to become open to the idea that you don't always have to be reactive toward the past. I teach a method to calm reactions. There are others out there. My method is called the daily practice. And if you watch this channel, you hear me talk about it like a lot. And I point you toward the description section under every video. That's where you can find it. It's a free course. It takes less than an hour to learn it and try it. And you can give it a try and see if, like me, it helps you take those looping thoughts and just kind of calm them down. Sometimes naming those stress thoughts and releasing them really does make a difference. So, good thing to try. Now, I'm going to keep teaching you under the assumption that you've tried these techniques, but if you haven't, just try to hear the essence of what I'm saying here. If you feel anxious at the thought of surrendering your fear and resentment through these exercises, and some people do because fear and resentment, for a lot of us, it's a primitive form of a boundary. Like being anxious and worried or angry can feel like the only protection we've got. Like, no way, you're not getting in. If that's you, I would just say, do it a tiny bit at a time, do a little bit at a time and see what happens, and just see when you do surrender fear about something, do you end up incapacitated? Or does it make you a doormat? Or does it make you feel like a little more lighter-hearted? If you're feeling more lighthearted, you're doing it right. It's not been my experience that facing what's bothering you and writing it down amplifies it or makes it worse. In fact, It makes me feel freer of it and more empowered. It makes me more clear about when something dangerous is in my presence and when I need to act on something. So you can try that. Just try that. You don't have to believe me. You try. Number 4 is stop trying to make other people not trigger you. All right. So if you get very triggered by people, and pretty much everyone with complex PTSD gets triggered by people, that's what makes connection hard for us, in fact. And that's what makes us have a tendency to want to isolate or keep people at arm's length, because those interactions can be so triggering. So there's a misunderstanding that if we could just get other people to stop behaving the way they do, or saying what they say, or making us feel the way we feel, then we would be okay. And sometimes, occasionally that's true, but it's usually not true. Because even if they wanted with all their hearts to stop triggering you, they probably wouldn't succeed. The trigger is in here. It's, somewhere in here. It's for you to work on. And anyway, most people are not willing to try to change everything for you. That's just reality. So you learning how to calm your triggers is going to be more effective, easier, and more empowering for you than trying to make the world around you change so that it doesn't trouble you. Now, when you can learn to calm your triggers, you become more perceptive, and you can begin to tell if someone in your presence is actually a difficult person, or if you're just feeling triggered and having difficulty, but they're not causing that difficulty. That's hard to tell sometimes, right? Surely you struggle. Sometimes I do. Is it just me? Is it them? Am I being crazy? Am I being a doormat? And in most cases, you're confused about that question because you have triggers. So learning to know the difference is called discernment. And discernment is one of the biggest things that we lose with CPTSD. The ability to tell the difference between, am I generating this drama, or is something actually being done to me? It's so difficult to go through life when you're not clear about that. That is a consequence for some of us of how we were raised, feeling really scared and upset and being like, I'm scared, there's all this fighting in the house, and go, no, there's nothing going on, shut up, go to bed, right? So you start second guessing yourself, and it turns into maybe a developmental delay, where you just have a little trouble like making sense of reality. So using the writing technique I'm telling you in the daily practice can be a really good way to start strengthening your discernment. You could also do that with a therapist. You could do that with friends. You could do that in a 12-step fellowship. It's really important, though, to have a way to face what's intense for you and to get some support while you figure out what is reality. There's no substitute for other people for that. And what a relief when you get a strong feeling that someone you meet doesn't belong in your life, or something they did was a deal breaker for you, versus when someone is a person you want in your life and you can see your triggers for what they are. You can work to make your relationship better. You can become more trustworthy. You can be a better friend to them by calming your triggers. What you open up for yourself with those calm triggers is choice. It's not going to make you like a perfectly nice person who puts up with anything. It's not going to make you mean. It just gives you choices about how you want to respond because you can perceive things better. So the other great thing about learning to calm your triggers is that you become flexible. You become able to hang out with a variety of different people, and you can be in all kinds of circumstances. You don't have to be so particular and have, so-called boundaries about, I don't do this, I don't let people say that. You can start to be flexible and just let people be themselves and let life happen around you. You are safe to relax around people when you know that when you need a boundary and you need to step back from someone, you can. And when you know your boundaries and you're prepared to honor them, you can be less afraid to connect with people and instead be more open to them. So all the bad things that come with CPTSD, problems with relationships, focusing, balancing your emotions, stress levels, all that gets less activated if you don't get triggered. So there's your superpower. If you were to do one thing, learn to notice when you're triggered and bring it down. Now, learning to notice dysregulation and a triggered state in yourself, that's a huge piece of what I teach in my coaching programs and my courses. Dysregulation triggers disconnection from people, and that in turn triggers self-defeating behavior. And when healing begins in those areas, good parts of you have room to come shining through. Your kindness, your competence, your talent, your joy, all of this has space to take root in your life and bear fruit. The good things in you, that's what gets suppressed by all the trauma. And it gets locked down when your reaction to hurt and trauma is to start to control the environment. Some people go through life suppressed, for years, but only because they were too dysregulated to manage stepping out of their safe zone. In the safe zone, you can't afford to connect with people or face your mistakes, right? But when you learn to calm triggers and re-regulate your emotions and your brain, you can take some risks and your life grows. Now remember, this is not just to feel better. You do have to feel better. You do need that. You deserve that. And what it gives you is an opening for the real healing to begin. And that's you becoming yourself and delivering the love and the contribution that you have to bring to the world. All right, number 5, stop trash talking the people who you choose to have in your life. It's very common for people who don't have CPTSD to just throw labels on people. This person's a narcissist, they're toxic, they're worthless. But if you really want to heal, if you want to double down on your healing, I encourage you to stop using those labels on people and instead just start noticing whatever you call it, the thing that other people do or have that is so troubling for you. The thing to focus on is not the other person, but the way that you get tense or you struggle around them. The way that your emotions rise up or you get dysregulated. That's the part. That's the part where you actually have influence over what happens next. You do have a right to make decisions about whether to let someone into your life or not. So now when you're triggered by someone, instead of just telling them, hey, you're a narcissist and therefore, you should read this book I found about narcissists, because that always goes over well, right? No, it doesn't. Well, you can either accept them or you can step away from the relationship. The more you recover, the more you'll be at peace with the people you want in your life. And the more quickly you'll be willing to withdraw from people who you don't want in your life. Focusing on yourself is always going to be your superpower. When you can notice, oh, here we go, this is where I get triggered. Now, this doesn't mean that you should just learn to put up with terrible behavior in other people. You want to be aware, you want to be grounded, lucid, clear-headed, clear-eyed, and perceptive so that you can make good decisions about how to proceed when somebody begins to treat you badly. And if somebody's treating you really well, of course, you want to be at your best. So you want to be able to open your heart and enjoy that relationship when it's a good thing to do. Number 6, stop clinging to bad relationships that make you miserable. Now, I have to bring this in any discussion of what it means to double down on your healing. Staying in bad relationships and hemorrhaging all your energy and your cognition to a situation where you're fighting all the time, or you're being treated in an abusive manner, or you're being gravely disrespected, or you're sad all the time. This will halt your healing. Now, I understand there are relationships where there's an obligation or a duty, as there is with, dependent children or with certain other people who rely on you for care. And that may require extra effort and extra support to remove yourself from those situations that are destroying your happiness and your chances of healing trauma. But whether it's simple or complicated for you to get that distance, it's important to keep moving forward. All right, number 7, it's the same thing, but for jobs. Don't stay in jobs that make you miserable unless your life depends on it. There are times when we all have to do what we have to do to get a paycheck, but not forever. Don't let that be forever. And if the paycheck is not the problem right now, I want you to ask yourself, is being miserable at work something you are unconsciously choosing so that you can avoid facing something else that's hard for you right now? And I talk about this very directly because it's something that I've had to face in myself too. There was a lot of time when I was still at the effect of CPTSD where if I weren't miserable, I would have to notice immediately that there was this giant hole in my life where close relationships were supposed to be. And instead I had superficial relationships and I hated my job. And I was getting my self-esteem off the fact that I had this job, but I wasn't happy and I didn't like the way I was being treated. And I stayed 10 years working for an awful boss. But because I didn't have to stay in that job, I know the problem was in here. The problem was that I was accepting this unhappy lot in life in exchange for not having to make changes that felt impossible for me back then. And this was when I was a single mom. And I think I could have, I was probably scared to leave the security of that job, except that one day when the recession of 2008 got rolling, you know what? I didn't have a job anymore anyway. But honestly, I'm so glad everything fell through, because it was then that I started my first business, really, because, nobody else would hire me. I had to do something for money. I got my business off the ground, and that ended up being a really happy way to earn a living for many years until I transitioned to doing this, to becoming Crappy Childhood Fairy. And for those of you who have other extenuating circumstances that are keeping you stuck, feel the truth of what I'm saying. Let it guide you. Don't let yourself give up on your healing. Trying doesn't always lead to success, but success favors people who try. All right, number 8, detach from the belief that you passively, just magically, attract bad people. Now, I hear people say this all the time. I attract narcissists. Well, acknowledge that the issue is not really who is attracted to you. The issue is, who are you attracted to? Who do you tolerate? Who do you date? Who do you sleep with? That is the problem. And that's a much better problem to have than some sort of magic occurrence that flies out of the sky. Oh, look, a narcissist has just landed and attached themselves to me. It can't happen without your cooperation. It may seem like they just occur. Think of those signs in the park. It says ticks occur. Narcissists occur. But you do not have to let them into your life. Occasionally, exploitative people do look for vulnerable people and target them, but most of the problems in your life are more likely to be caused by a lack of boundaries on your part, a lack of a red flag detector, and being able to see, like, who should I let into my life? It's your red flag detector that needs to be switched into the on position, and that's part of trauma healing too. If you're going to double down on your healing, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to take responsibility that you are the gatekeeper. And you may have heard me say, I attract mosquitoes, but, I don't marry them. Or sometimes I say, I don't sleep with them. I think that would be a good t-shirt. But see, attracting them is not really the problem. Number 9, if you have addictive behaviors, make recovery your first priority. Alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, spending, all that stuff. Your healing will get an enormous boost if you can take care of that. When you allow yourself to experience life's ups and downs and show up for it and not escape by some means, and I think we should include limerence in that, just checking out into fantasy, right? When you can stay in your life, then you can start to solve your problems. I know how tempting it is to try to grab on and control things or run away from them or just get into some kind of oblivion, some comfort. And it's almost universal with people with CPTSD, the urge to fly away or crawl into a hole. It's going to take one form or the other. It's going to visit you sometimes, but if you're using anything at all to sort of genuinely escape, like drugs, it's going to delay your ability to cope with feelings of disappointment and stress and emptiness and loneliness. Those are feelings that we actually need to have sometimes because they guide us into action. I totally know what it's like. But if you're using something to escape, it will make healing almost impossible. And even when you're perfectly healed, life is going to have its ups and downs, so there's always something to face. You're going to lose friends. Big disappointments will happen. Outside events will happen. You're going to need a means to be able to handle what comes. Whatever approach to healing that you choose for yourself, you're going to need an easy way to self-comfort and bring yourself back out of dysregulation and into re-regulation. And if you want to learn how to do it, I can teach you. That's all in the links in the description section below this video and all my videos, if that's something that interests you. When you always have a way to calm your reactions and comfort yourself, you'll find it's a lot easier to overcome addictions. That is true freedom, when you feel like, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, I'll be able to face it. All right, number 10, sit down and ask yourself, this is just a thought exercise, and I really like this one. Ask yourself, if I really had to solve this problem of having CPTSD, what are 10 things I could do? And I love doing this. You can apply it to any kind of problem. But it's a really good one to do about how you would heal from your trauma, because you actually have the answers. You do. You have the answers in there. You just haven't tapped them yet. Or you may not have had the energy to focus on, taking action on them right now. So make a list of them, the 10 things that if you really had to solve this problem, in a short period of time, what would you do? You don't have to act on all of them at once. They can be preposterous. But write it. Just bring them into the sunlight of your awareness, the actions you could take if you really wanted to. Let them into your mind and heart and just see what happens. What I'm about to say is going to challenge a lot of people watching right now, but here it is. No matter what's going on in your life, it's possible to lift your mood and feel happier even when the circumstances of your life are depressing and hard. Now, you can't solve all your problems at once, but feeling at least a little bit better is the first step, getting the inner power that you need to come up a little bit so that you can start making changes in your life. With that little bit of healing, you'll be clearer about your next steps. And when you keep on this path, one foot after the other, you can actually heal from the past and start making the changes in your life that will make your continuing happiness possible. Change and healing are definitely possible, especially when you know how to increase your inner power a little bit when you need to. And I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, saying that you can feel happier today is almost countercultural. A lot of people are invested in the idea that, well, there's the pessimist, the damage is done, happiness is gone forever, the world is a terrible place, and I've suffered all these losses. And I know that's true. I've suffered the losses too. There's some truth in this pessimistic thinking that there's no hope at all, but really it's just another self-defeating behavior to become totally identified with the problem and completely resistant to the solution. And at the other end of the spectrum are people who say that suffering is just a state of mind and you just need to visualize your awesome reality. And well, that's just bypassing this inconvenient truth that healing your life actually does involve self-awareness and actual change. There's effort involved. And somewhere between those two are so-called helpers who tell you, well, healing is possible, but the only way to get there is to get really, really sad and dwell more on what happened to you. And it's going to take a long time. And if you tell them that, hey, it doesn't feel like it's working for me, they'll say, well, it has to get a lot worse before it gets better. Well, I wouldn't listen to those people. And that's the pessimists, the bypassing optimists, and that it's got to feel really bad and that's going to go on for a long time. All of it. These are three places where I see people who have trauma get really stuck. And the fact is, if you're carrying trauma around, becoming free of it is going to be a lot of small and practical changes that you sustain over time. And you can do that. And it does need to help you feel better, quickly. Today, it needs to feel better. When life gets hard, you need a way to get emotional relief when you need it. And then you need practical day-by-day strategies to stay feeling happier and to build that happy life. So I want to show you some simple and practical ways to get an instant lift for your mood and energy. Even just a little positive change is worth it, and it can lead to the big changes that you're looking for. And you might find that these little steps I'm going to show you lead to much more than little changes and a little bit of uplift. Sometimes really good things happen. And I know this because I'm someone who has had a lot of suffering in my life. I've had good things, but I've had long periods of loneliness, the death of people I love, medical problems, very serious ones, financial problems, and definitely relationship problems. And here's the thing. I learned to be happier before these problems were solved. Being happier gave me so much more power to see the solutions and to take action. So these are simple strategies that you can use whenever you're in a bad place, depressed, angry, dysregulated, exhausted, feeling like you can't pull yourself together or you can't pop out of it. Now remember, you don't always have to know the reason you're feeling bad. What I'm teaching you doesn't depend on knowing that or any kind of knowledge at all. It's not about figuring out the past or making people apologize. It's none of those things. Those are nice. But sometimes it helps to take your focus off the past and off the pain for a while. And I'm not telling you to go into denial or to just repeat affirmations that the problems don't exist. You don't have to believe anything, in fact, to try this. You don't have to accept anything. I'm not someone who can really accept things that I don't believe in anyway. I tend to go on experience. If things feel fake, well, I just prefer to try things and see how it goes. If it works, adopt it. So try that with me. It's possible to influence your mood with practical actions that let you still be your real self, not lose track of the problems in your life that actually need solving at some point, and to get into the habit of feeling better so that you don't have to go through all the steps of getting there every time you're feeling down. It'll start to be your natural default state. So the first thing to do, are you ready, is to get up an hour earlier than you normally would. And I can hear the chorus of people going, I can't do that. I already have insomnia. I work a late shift. And you don't have to take any of my advice, and you don't have to do any of one particular thing in this list of things I'm going to give you. But I am going to say you can get up earlier. And yes, you might be a bit tired in the afternoon, but it's a good way to reduce the stress that makes mornings such a vulnerable time for overwhelm, for discombobulation, for dysregulation and depression. When you get up early and you get up out of bed, you're freeing yourself from both hurrying to get out of the house, which can be a major trigger for dysregulation, by the way, and you're freeing yourself from immobilization, where you stay in bed for too long after you wake up, which is like a big open door for depressed emotions. So get up an hour earlier, then get up out of bed. And what to do about being tired? Nothing. Being tired is not an emergency. Get a hot beverage if you enjoy that. I'm a coffee person, maybe you are too, or you like something different, but get your beverage and then move forward to the second thing that you can do to feel happier, which is to do some writing. Now, some people write in their journals. I teach techniques that help you get your anxious and depressed thoughts out of your head and onto paper, which is different than journaling. If you want to learn my technique, you can always find the link to my free course called The Daily Practice down in the description section underneath all my videos. It's also on my website at Crappy Childhood Fairy, by the way. You can see everything that I offer there if you want to go there, crappychildhoodfairy.com. When you get your fear and resentment out of your head and onto paper, your mind gets a little vacation and your thoughts are free to happen. And maybe even inspired thoughts are going to visit you. Not just a bunch of worrying and rumination, but, constructive things that come to your mind. In my daily practice technique, there's a process to both name those negative thoughts and release them, or ask for them to be removed if you have a higher power, which I do. And it's so important that you don't write these fears and resentments as a form of ranting. Just, I hate this, I fear this, I fear resent that, but more as a process for naming and releasing those thoughts that are otherwise spinning the hamster wheel of doom in your mind. Hamster wheel of doom, do you have that? So you may relate to the fact that I wake up irritable and anxious sometimes, which is a complex PTSD thing. So this practice is important for me. It brings emotional fresh air that empowers me, and it empowers me to have a fruitful and productive and happy day. The third thing to do is to meditate. Now, I meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. If you can even do 5 minutes, it makes a huge difference. And by meditation, I don't necessarily mean anything difficult. You don't have to sit in a special way. You don't have to have an empty mind or focus on your breath or anything. You just rest with your eyes closed, maybe with a mantra, like a simple word like okay or this. Some word that reminds you that you're meditating but doesn't put a lot of demands. And don't use guided meditations. That's a completely different thing to put information in. You're not there to learn a new thing. You're there to release and rest. Now, you may have an established meditation practice, and if that's really easy for you, use that one. Now, a lot of people, I hear they criticize themselves and say, you know what, I can't really meditate. I just think so much. I do it wrong. And that's precisely why people like us need to meditate. It's because we have an active mind, a mind that is designed, in fact, to think. So we just give it a nice rest and take off all expectation that it'll be perfect or have no thoughts or be perfectly empty like a still pond. It's never like that, is it? It might not even feel like a good meditation, but you don't have to be good at meditating to just start meditating. You start where you are. You start writing fears and resentments on paper beforehand, which is how the daily practice is sequenced: writing, then meditation, specific form of writing, easy meditation. They go together and it starts getting easier all around. The fourth thing for lifting your mood is to exercise hard. Now, there was a time when I had acute PTSD, and if you've ever heard my story, There have been a couple of times in my life where some really traumatic things happened, where the PTSD symptoms were so strong I could barely work or hold a conversation. My mind was seriously stressed, and I was scattered, and my body was having full adrenal freak out several times a day. And every time something reminded me of one particularly traumatic experience, when someone close to me had died, I'd flash back to the memory of that experience, and adrenaline would whoosh through me, and my heart would pound and my thoughts would scatter, and it was really debilitating. So this PTSD reaction had been going on for months, and I happened to see a doctor, and she said, well, how many times a day are you having these freak out episodes you're telling me about? And I was like, not that much, just like 10 or 20 times a day. And she said, okay, we're going to have to start putting you on some medication. Well, I didn't want to do that. And the reason is I had such a dramatic healing from terrible depression earlier on in my life. And when I first found my daily practice, I recovered from that depression. I never went down to that place again. And I felt like I'd gone from such a chaotic mental state to such a good one. I really have not wanted to mess with psychoactive drugs, lest I go back to that place where I thought I would never get out of. And so I try to avoid antidepressants. So I didn't want to do it. I told her I'd come back in a couple weeks, though. And instead of taking drugs, I told her I would try some other things. And I went online and I searched, what does a person do if they can't stop going into panic mode all day? And one thing suggested was to go exercise hard. And lo and behold, it worked. I couldn't believe the doctor never mentioned this to me, but I figured it out for myself. Now, what does exercising hard mean? It can be different depending on what you're used to doing, but you want to get your heart rate up for at least 20 minutes. If you're able to run, that's really good. If that's more than you can do, you can walk for 20 minutes. If you can walk briskly, all the better. If you can walk for an hour, that's a good thing too. When you're in the middle of a life crisis, give yourself a good bit of exercise. Walk till it tires you out. If you're not able to walk, do what you can to get your body moving and your heart rate just gently up for a while. And if you can do that in nature even, that's better. I'm sure you have had experience with how good that feels. So that's why number 5 is to do your exercise or do anything at all outside. Go outside. Outside is where the sun is on you, and even if it's cold or wet weather or gray, your brain likes to know what's going on outside. What day is it? What season is it? You're like a little cat in the window. Hey, what's going on? This is part of neurological regulation. And so being outside helps you get regulated and calibrated and feel normal in your body, which helps you sleep normally and feel hungry at the right time. And normal sleep and normal eating aren't always easy for traumatized or depressed people or people who have gone through a big shock. But this can help nudge you in the right direction. And of course, the daylight is powerful medicine to move that depression away, to cue your brain. It's time to feel better. It's time to come out of it and to talk to your nervous system and coax it into normal rhythms. Now, also, if you're going to walk or run, it can be nice to do it instead of on a treadmill, to do it on a natural surface like up and down on the curb or on the sidewalk or on a dirt road where there's a little bit of unevenness, because your brain likes that. It likes that little bit of a challenge. It likes to sense the changes on the surface and balance you and feel like it's a little bit slippery here, so you slow down, and here it's downhill. And those little changes in your perception of space, they feel good to your nervous system. So much of what's going on with complex PTSD, especially when you're struggling with your mood or feeling physically deadened, is that there's dysregulation going on in your brain and nervous system and emotions, and it makes everything harder and clunkier and duller. So people who were traumatized as kids are extra prone to dysregulation. Luckily, we all instinctively know how to re-regulate. It's not always easy when you're feeling stressed and sad, but the techniques I'm teaching you will help you get re-regulated faster and stay regulated more of the time. Number 6 is to do your movement in a group if you can. Movement together with other people. Other people, I know they're so triggering, right? But hanging out with them can be very therapeutic, even if you're not talking to them. When you're following verbal instructions like you do in a kickboxing class or ballroom dancing or yoga, where the instructor is calling out, okay, now put your right foot over here, left kick, or twirl to the right, and everybody twirls to the right. They don't know why exactly yet, but it amplifies the beneficial effect of the movement that you're doing it together with other people. And hearing and responding with your body to the verbal instructions left and right also accelerates your recalibration and the re-regulation of your brain. And it brings you out of that PTSD fog. And there's a center line in your body. And so one of the things you can also do is use exercises that cross that line. So instead of just, put my right hand out, I put my right hand on my left shoulder, and there's like just a little boost of amplification to the re-regulating effect of that movement. It's helpful. So number 7 is to eat some protein with every meal. Overeating, and particularly sugar and high carb processed food, is very strongly correlated with complex PTSD. Part of it is we just need to grab something easy, but part of it is also there's an emotionally numbing effect from carbing up like that. A lot of breakfast foods like toast and donuts and cereal are just pure fast carbs, and they will take your energy and they'll whoosh them up and then they'll crash them down. And anything that's making your hormones, and hormones are what govern your digestion and your hunger and your sense that it's time to eat. So anything that's making your endocrine system, your hormones spike up and then crash down, then that tends to be a little triggering for PTSD symptoms as well. So a little bit of advice is to make sure that you're eating protein with your meals, even if you're eating carby foods too. Just get some in there. If you were going to have toast, have an egg on toast, or have some, chia pudding and toast. If sweets and carby foods tend to trigger overeating in you, you might want to check out the food plan I follow, which is very flexible, whether you're vegan or a carnivore, whatever you are. It's a way of eating that helps minimize the spikes in insulin and helps restore your leptin levels, which is the hormone that responds to insulin. That program, they have a food quiz, food susceptibility quiz. It's called Bright Line Eating. The link to the food quiz is down in the description section below, very near the bottom. You can take that quiz and find out if you have a very common trauma symptom where you're highly susceptible to kind of addictive eating of high carb foods. Would explain a lot, right? So if you've had some trauma in the past and you're like me, you're vulnerable to feeling overwhelmed. Eating too many fast carbohydrates can make you feel numb and scattered and make you feel worse because it's hard to get anything done, which of course leads to more overwhelm later. So this is number 8, to get out of overwhelm and work deliberately on good, useful activities for yourself and for the people around you. It can be good to make a list. So for me, every morning after I meditate, I make a list of the most important things that I'd like to get done that day. And I know that there's a lot of stuff on my list that I'm probably not going to get to, and I'm okay with that. But I therefore zero in on the top 3, the 3 most important things for me to get done that day. And even then, I can't always do the 3 things. So I zero in on the top 1 thing, and I take them in order, and I make sure that the most important thing on my list gets done first. I make that the top priority. Now, sometimes when I'm choosing what's going to be the top priority, I'll choose the one that's the hardest, so I can eliminate the sense of dread that comes with having a hard thing ahead of me during the day. Number 9, this one's kind of special, but if you just want to get your spirits up, fight the urge to talk about anything negative. We've been conditioned that if we're feeling bad about something, we should talk to as many people as possible, talk more about it, especially if you're a woman. Have you noticed this? When people say, hey, how you doing? It's really easy to give the whole terrible story like, well, oh gosh, this thing is going on and it's so hard, and all the stuff going on in the world, and I've got a headache, and my neighbor lost her job, and you won't even believe the blah, 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 blah. So if you want to change your mood, I just encourage you to experiment with not talking about it. Don't talk about the thing that's bothering you. Keep your focus on where you're trying to go on the stuff that's positive for you. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying to never talk about what's bothering you. Sometimes, obviously, it's purposeful and important to talk to somebody about things that are bothering you. So I'm not saying go into denial or pretend nothing is bad. Just try experimenting with not talking about the thing that's bothering you And you'll be surprised how easy it is to have your mood start going in a completely new direction. You're not constantly reminding yourself how upset you are about something, right? So this is also good when you're trying to get over someone after a breakup. Stop talking about that person. Not only don't call them, don't look at their social media, just stop talking about them, good or bad. All right? Number 10, and there's a question to ask yourself. What am I avoiding? A lot of times a depressed mood is really just a sense of dread about something you're avoiding. And it could be something like you're avoiding something that you need to learn for work, right? Or you're avoiding getting in touch with someone who you know you owe a phone call. Or you're not taking care of a problem that needs your attention, like you have a kid who is falling behind in school and you haven't dealt with it. It brings you down. You might be avoiding a task that you need to do and it's bothering you. And I'm sure you've noticed that it can ruin all your free time, worrying about it or procrastinating on it while you think about doing it, but you don't do it. So you can write, what am I avoiding? Make a list and see if you can find the next right action for you to take there to give yourself that good feeling of accomplishment, knowing that you're taking care of your life, you have integrity. And finally, this is my favorite part. If you really want to have a good day, find something kind that you can do for somebody where they won't find out who did it for them. If they find out, you don't get to check it off for that day, having done your good deed. It's a secret that you have. The reason I say do this secretly is because if there's any chance that you're going to get credit or be thought of as this really nice person, it can sometimes dilute the beneficial effect, the deep benefits of doing a kindness for someone. You're doing this for your own happiness, and if it helps someone else, that's really good. If you can call somebody who you know is having a hard time, make that phone call. You can put your neighbor's empty trash cans back in their driveway after pickup. You can go put a few quarters in somebody's parking meter when you see it's expired. If you can't afford to pay for other people's parking, you can give someone a kind word, and this is the best one. You can just say, you know what, you're doing a great job, or you can compliment them and say, the way that you just explained that to somebody was so clear. You have a knack for that. Be real with them. Don't make stuff up. If it's appropriate to put a hand on their shoulder, it isn't always, but if it is, that can make the kindness of your words feel even stronger and more impactful. The point is to pay attention to what other people have done that is deserving of a compliment and just give that to them. People need it far more than you realize. When you do that, you become an agent of good, which is really what you're made for. Life feels good when you remember this, and you remember it by acting like it, even when the motivation isn't really there at first. You don't wait to be motivated. You can just go through the motions, and the benefit comes to you. Even when you're sad, the good things that you do could have a big impact on someone else who is suffering, and that counts too. When you witness their spirits come up, your spirits can't help but brighten up too. So many things that we've been told about healing our lives and recovering from old traumas is wrong. Have you noticed this? The wisdom a person needs to live a good life, to grow past the bad things that happened. I know people knew this at one time, but it's like it got broken up into pieces and tossed up with a lot of other ideas. And I started figuring this out years ago when I used to go to a lot of 12-step meetings. And I went to thousands of them over the years, and sometimes the same meeting every week for years. I'd just go. I would see the same people over and over again. And I had the opportunity not only to work on myself, but to observe other people who were making incredible progress. They were totally changing their lives like before my eyes, and they were shedding old problems, and it was really attractive. And these people were, a really positive influence on me. But I also had the chance to observe people who didn't make any progress. And this really shaped me too, and in fact formed my whole philosophy about how to heal and change your life and how you maybe don't want to approach it. Because you'll notice not a lot of people succeed at healing their trauma. It's not like an automatic given. And a lot of people reach out for help, but it's rare that anybody really breaks through, like really blossoms. It's a huge deal when someone does. And back when I was really struggling with what I now know were childhood PTSD symptoms, I was scared that I'd end up stuck like so many people in the meetings I went to, but I was determined to find a way to do it, to be one of the people who heals and changes. And so I was paying attention and taking notes, and I sought mentorship, not just in 12-step, but in like a few different disciplines. And so when you come to my channel, you'll notice that how I approach healing is something different than what's out there. I'm very direct. I teach people to be honest with themselves, self-directed, have sovereignty over their healing. And I bring in a lot of common sense wisdom, but I'm also very countercultural when you hold up my philosophy, and it is a distinct philosophy along with a set of techniques. But when you hold up my approach against the mainstream mental health world and their approach and their beliefs about what trauma is and how to heal it, well, there's differences, and I want to talk about those differences. Now, I have an open mind to the fact that different people respond to different things, but I think there are some really negative and limiting and even destructive ideas out there. And just in case those ideas are all you ever got and you're feeling hopeless or stuck, like healing can't happen for you, I want to present an alternative that might help you get a breakthrough. Now, I love doing this work because all day I'm witnessing and communicating with people who are getting that breakthrough. And I feel strongly that everyone deserves this chance to heal from their trauma. And I'm very driven by this mission. And I've always been interested in how people who are struggling with depression and trauma can heal and make positive changes. It was so hard to get real information about that for me when I needed it. But I had that breakthrough, and the healing work it's a lifelong project. It's a happy project, but I'm never done. I don't think anyone ever is. It's something we're always working on. We're always, it's kind of like a condition that you maintain. And I'm unfolding as a person, just like you are, just like everybody is. So I have complex PTSD. And now that I know what it is, I can see that I've always had it. I had a rough childhood. I've talked about it in my courses and on my videos. It was mostly because my mother had severe alcoholism, and that brought in all the problems that go with alcoholism. And I'd say the CPTSD symptoms, I first remember them when my mom moved us to a new state when I was 9, away from my father, and I lost him, and I lost my support system. So I was isolated. And it got worse in my teens when I started having sex. And it's common for kids who were abused to sort of fall apart at that point in their lives. And then I got my heart broken. Then I got my heart broken a whole bunch. And then I really got my heart broken in my late 20s. And at about the same time, I was a victim of a violent crime. And also in the same couple of weeks, my mother died. So I was effed up. I was not just sad, I was scared, I was freaked out. And that's when it became obvious that something was really wrong with me. And there was no name for it. And it also became obvious that doing normal mainstream therapy not only wasn't helping me, but it had never helped. And in fact, I think it was kind of making it worse. So I thought I was some kind of really extra screwed up person. I was convinced that my therapist was judging me, like for, being so unresponsive to things that were helpful to people in normal cases. And they definitely didn't know what was wrong with me or what to do, but they thought they knew what to do. And they didn't really address the self-defeating behaviors that were all over my life and creating an extra load of trauma and drama. Like 80% of my trauma at that point was self-created stuff. There was the childhood that led me to the self-defeating behavior, but those behaviors were then really bogging me down. So yeah, my therapist had me talking about my feelings, about my memories, and it was literally making my symptoms worse and worse. Now, to be fair, therapists back then didn't know what was wrong because there was no name for it. And the name we now know, it's complex PTSD. And that's the kind that comes from chronic exposure to intense stress, usually in childhood. Doesn't have to be, it could be at other times in a person's life. And it seems obvious now, if you know what it is and you've had a chance to check that knowledge with your experience of struggles and healing from what happened to you. But even now, most mental health professionals don't have a working knowledge of complex PTSD. A lot of people, doctors, therapists, mental health programs, they say that they're trauma informed, but that's really a subjective term. And, what do they mean by that? You have to ask. And what do they propose that a person does if they have CPTSD or trauma? So you'll notice there's a lot more talk about the problem of trauma than the solution to it. How do you actually heal? And that's what my life's work has become. So I hit the end of the road and I was hopeless about all avenues of help available to me. This was back 29 years ago now. And then something happened and I healed. Not overnight, of course, but, in bursts. And I had a big burst of healing when I first found the techniques that I still use every day. I've been using them ever since I was first shown. And that's the daily practice. That is a set of techniques. I teach them for free. It's a free course. It's always down in the description section below every video I make. So you can always access that. And I'd love it if you did. If you take the course, you can come join me on free Zoom calls that I lead every couple weeks. So I'd love to meet you there. I answer questions, we use the techniques together, and you can see if they help you as much as they help me to calm your CPTSD symptoms. But back then there was a core hole in my spirit that got healed all at once in a short amount of time. And I had a lot to work out after that, big problems in my life, and I'm still not perfect or perfectly healed, but I don't get into trauma-driven problems like I used to. And when I hit trouble, I know what to do. And that's what I teach here and in my courses and workshops and coaching, an alternative self-led path to healing that can help whether you have access to professional help or not. Now, in some ways, it's a radical approach. Now that I'm writing a book about it, and I realize how much all the videos here are they're like a sea urchin. They're like little spikes of information. I'm putting out one video is a spike and here, and I talk about this and this. And so now writing the book demands that I be linear and that I weave my lessons around a coherent philosophy, which I've known for years. I know my philosophy, but I don't think I've ever articulated it all at once. My philosophy informs every video I make. And so I want to have it all laid out in one place and in one video, and this is it. Are you ready? Okay. I have 8 principles, and the first one is trauma is an injury, not an identity. So we used to think of symptoms of trauma as primarily psychological, right? We now know that they're largely neurological. And by extension, they're physiological, because neurological means nervous system. And your nervous system not only governs, your nerves, your brain, it governs your whole body. And it affects your emotions, it affects your hormones, your immune system, your sensations when you feel like it's time to go to sleep. It governs your physical life. And so when you have a neurological injury, which is what trauma is, it can affect everything in your body. And that explains what we now know, that a history of early trauma can really increase your risk, not your certainty, but your risk of serious health problems. Not just the things that we've always kind of known, like depression, anxiety, bad relationships, we've known that, but it can also give you heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, obesity, reproductive disorders, endocrine disorders, immune disorders, learning disabilities, problems with memory, an increased risk of dementia. Ooh, that one scares me. So there's almost no bad thing on earth in people that isn't made worse by trauma. So we have every incentive to heal. Okay, so also part of this injury is that adult symptoms of childhood abuse and neglect ruin lives. They ruin careers, like so many careers. They ruin relationships and they ruin families. The effects of trauma, we kind of knew this instinctively, but when you really measure it out, if you look at people who are incarcerated, there's such a high rate of traumatized people in there. If you look at people with addictions, if you look at people with grave mental health disorders, all of it is made so much worse by trauma. So that's starting to be finally dealt with. As a person with CPTSD, I can sort of say we're the most expensive people in the healthcare system. And so there's an incentive not just for us, but for the whole system to find a better way to help us. I don't think they've done it yet. They talk about it, they're not there yet, but that's what we're doing here, is practical ways to start bringing those symptoms down. And I can definitely say my health improved dramatically 29 years ago. I feel healthier, more energetic, more alert than I did at that age. And it's thanks to being able to re-regulate my thinking, my nervous system, to bring my vital signs kind of back into alignment through using my tools. I use my tools, and that's, again, my daily practice. You can learn that too. The effects of early trauma are more serious than they realized, and they're more wide-ranging. And it's not just the obvious stuff. And CPTSD, it can't be cured, but the symptoms can be healed. And I do think of it something like diabetes, where you may have it, but you can reverse your symptoms by changing how you do your day, what you eat, what medicine you take. For us, there also is a way of living that can help turn those symptoms back around. And if you do that, you can have continued good health and keep going. And then if you sort of fall apart, the symptoms come back. So that's how I experience CPTSD. And if it were to get worse, especially as we get older, if it were to get worse, the symptoms could become more grave. So I just want to emphasize, it's so important. It's so important to address your symptoms. You may not know what caused your symptoms. You may never know, and that will be okay if you can learn to calm your symptoms. All right, the second principle, dysregulation is an almost universal symptom among traumatized people. People don't talk about this. You may have never been told. But neurological dysregulation, it's a nervous system phenomenon. It can be measured in the brain. It can be measured in your vital signs. And easily observable signs that you might notice are things like difficulty focusing, your heartbeat being irregular, going up randomly or just too high, feeling clumsy, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, or once you've gotten emotionally overwhelmed and maybe, expressed anger that was kind of over the top, then going emotionally flat, like you feel nothing. And even your thinking will be like, I don't care. And there's this weird silence after intense outbursts. Well, that could be neurological dysregulation if you relate to that. Now, everyone is sometimes dysregulated, and most people will eventually re-regulate, but dysregulation seems to be exacerbated by traumatic experiences, and the brain changes that as a result. And so people with CPTSD will get dysregulated more often, more intensely, and they'll have a harder time coming back out of dysregulation. So luckily that can be healed. But dysregulation is responsible for, a wide range of the symptoms that we associate with trauma. Like, why does trauma cause people to have a higher probability of getting lupus or MS? Why does having a history of trauma make it so hard to heal tissue? Like, I got stuck in the hospital once for over a month. I could not heal. And it was at an extremely traumatic time in my life. And I had surgery after surgery after surgery. And they kept saying, we don't know why, but just everything keeps breaking down after we operate. And then I got back, I had left my daily practice techniques. And then I came back to them. I just came back and started really working on calming. I didn't know what dysregulation was at the time. I didn't know what CPTSD was. I just knew that I was really freaked out again. And I pulled it way back using my techniques. And then I healed. Then my body healed. And so I've had physicians tell me, physicians who know what trauma is, yeah, probably I was somaticizing my trauma, which means sort of expressing it physically, like the trauma plays out with limited blood flow or, poor immune response to infection. I was having a lot of infections. I kept hemorrhaging, I was having all these problems. And then my body kind of pulled it together. And it pulled it together when I was addressing my trauma symptoms. So again, I did not know that was trauma, but later I looked back and it's like, that's what it was. My daily practice that I was using the whole time. It was calming my symptoms. And the effect when I'm using my tools consistently is always like an improvement in my physical well-being and my mental focus. So dysregulation also has cognitive elements. There's emotional disruption, and I would say emotional, developmental delays. And so there's like this damage or delay to our ability to connect with other people, our ability to kind of read the room and sense what other people are feeling, how to face up when things are awkward and how to apologize or how to ask someone out. All that stuff, it can get delayed because trauma is just, it's doing something with the neurological injury that's a little hard to connect. That's what it feels like to me. And it's consistent with some of the research that I've seen. Now, self-defeating behaviors that result directly from dysregulation and from the injury of trauma. Self-defeating behavior, I feel like, does not get addressed adequately. And I don't know, I saw something like 11 therapists, and they were always like very ready to talk about what my mom had done, what the suffering was in my life. But in terms of the mistakes that I was actively making that were making my life terrible and driving people away, I had a harder time getting help. And I guess, I don't know if they didn't understand or relate, or if they were trying to go easy on me. They thought it would be too distressing for me to be confronted or criticized about stuff that I was doing to mess up my life. And I ended up, what I ended up learning, my daily practice, as well as, getting some, like a big truth bomb in my face, was from a woman who was a peer who showed me the daily practice. And she was just like, yeah, you have to stop hurting people. You have to stop being selfish. And I was like, what? Nobody had ever told me that. Like, there was a lot of talk about how other people had been bad, but just it never came back to me. And I was so ready, because the beautiful thing, when you realize like it was you who was making a lot of the mistakes, it was you who was being rude, selfish, using people socially. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff going on. But when you know it's you, it's like, guess what? It's something you can change. Now, what my mom did, I couldn't change. My mom died before all this, she died at the beginning of my healing process. Not a coincidence. Like, I started healing as a result of all the pain that was in my life at that time. And that's when I could begin to get honest with myself about the role my self-defeating behaviors played. Some of the attitudes I had were social or cultural, and some of it I learned from my mom. I grew up, part of the time my childhood was in a commune. It was very crazy, druggy, people having sex on the floor, that kind of thing. And, it wasn't exactly a great moral education for me. And it's not like I didn't learn anything about like a good way of life or what was a way to be a good person. There's a lot of ways to pick that up. A little bit from my parents, from some good teachers, friends' parents, TV, good old TV, Where would we be without it? Like, how should I act? What is a good person? So I learned all of that, but a lot of my suffering and a lot of the ways I was doing self-defeating behavior was from cultural messages like, hey, I have to be authentic. I have to be myself. I have needs. I was just kind of like taking those things a little too far. I didn't know any better. So these three, which is dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior, they flow into each other and they make each other worse. They can also make each other better, but when your trauma symptoms are getting the better of you, it's usually like a ping-pong between those 3 points: dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior. Now, all three of those things, there's one thing that activates them, and it's triggers. So learning to calm triggers, and this is the fourth principle, learning to calm your triggers is the starting place to break the cycle. If you can calm your triggers, an ordinary, natural healing process can follow. If you've been trying to heal and trying to heal and trying to heal, and you keep, you get 2 steps forward and then 10 steps back, it's probably that your triggers haven't been addressed. And these days, people say triggered, it can refer to anything really, like something you don't like or you disagree with. But when we're talking about triggers in the context of trauma, we mean something that sets off the neurological dysregulation. A stimulus happens, and for reasons you can't totally understand or control, a nervous system reaction kicks in. Your heart's pounding, your thinking gets distorted. Really, if you do a brain scan, left front cortex is going down, less activity. Right front cortex is your emotional center. It's going up. What's going down over here is reasoning. So less reasoning, more emotion. That's what it feels like to be triggered. The way people talk about triggers, it's as if it's other people's problem that they do it. But what the problem is that we react to stimulus that way. That's the problem. You can learn to calm it. And it's a lot more productive to learn to calm your reaction to things that trigger your neurological dysregulation. Way more productive than trying to get other people to stop being themselves. People are going to people, right? Stuff is going to happen. People are going to overlook you. They're going to criticize you. They're going to reject you. This is always going to be part of life. They're going to not get you. They're going to team up with each other and leave you out, like all that stuff, like that's hard for a person with CPTSD. But when you learn to calm your triggers, it can't set off that like dysregulation, disconnection, self-defeating behavior. So you can practice this and you can strengthen yourself, practiced and strengthened against triggers. Now, calming can largely be accomplished through simple techniques that you manage yourself. You don't necessarily need to see a professional for this. These are things that many generations for thousands of years have known about how to start calming down the nervous system. And if you ask me, it should be the first line of treatment. And it includes things like intense exercise, doing something that involves the left side of the body and the right side of the body, like marching. And actually, when you do one of these exercises with other people, it magnifies the beneficial effect. And so that's interesting, right? For thousands of years, soldiers have marched. And then they also will sing or chant together, hey, hey. And doing that together with other people, the voice, the body, it's how people re-regulate. Nobody maybe knew that's exactly what was going on, but people have figured this out. And I think that if people are like fighting in a battle, you bet they're triggered. Their trauma is activated. It's going on right now. And so it's only practical that they learned how to sort of bring their nervous system back into line so that they could manage their bodies and their body systems and pay attention and sleep at night. All of those things are critical for anything intense like battle, right? And so we can learn from that, how people did that. Singing together is re-regulating. And then sometimes like a little shock to your senses. It could be like a cold shower or warm hand washing, something that reminds you of your senses. You plunk down in a chair. I have a sheet, and I'll remember to put this down in the description section below. It's a sheet about the 10 emergency measures you can use to re-regulate yourself. Very good to keep handy, like carry it with you. So those are the emergency measures. And then the ongoing measure for re-regulation that I teach is the daily practice. And that's always down below too. So I recommend that for everybody, whether or not you have access to professional help. This lack of awareness or focus or solutions for treating dysregulation is why conventional methods have been so minimally successful to treat complex PTSD. There is poor evidence of good efficacy. It's marginal. And a little bit, you might even question it because, especially where drugs are involved, there's this incentive to hand select the studies that are included in, the measurement of is it effective. And there's ways that you can really jigger the research to make it look like something's more effective than it is. But it's, placebo, therapy, medication, they're all kind of close. And physical exercise, intense physical exercise, has recently been shown to be at least as effective as therapy or meds, or both. And I just remember when I had acute PTSD, nobody told me that. They were ready to just slap me on some medication. And I didn't want to do that because I had had this powerful experience when I first got my daily practice of having my depression go away. But then something really bad happened and I got into like adult onset PTSD symptoms, which had me looping and looping on the memory of the bad thing and going into sort of like adrenal overdrive. My heart would pound and I was getting worn down. It was going on for a year and a half and I finally mentioned it to a doctor and I had been in therapy for months at that time. They were like, oh, you got to get on medication. But I didn't want to. And I said, hold on. And I got online and I researched and there were a few things that I could do that I thought I just wanted to try first. And it was intense exercise. So for 45 minutes, I would run or I would like walk up a hill, something to get my heart going and get sweat going. I drank a lot of water. I stopped eating sugar or consuming alcohol. And guess what? My PTSD symptoms went way down, like most of the way. And sometimes if you can go from here to here with those symptoms, from here you've kind of got it. It's no longer getting the better of you and you can start to manage better. And that's what happened for me. I did those simple interventions and didn't have to go on the medication. So talk therapy is largely focused on noticing feelings and recounting memories. And while this is counterintuitive, talking about your trauma can be a trigger for dysregulation. And when you're dysregulated, you can't really process emotions or memories. Even if you had some sort of breakthrough, you would have a hard time remembering what happened during your therapy session. And that's what happened to me. I would just I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of good. But there would be between sessions, I would just regress. I would just go right back. But it became very clear to me that talking about trauma was dysregulating to the point that it was counterproductive. Now, I recognize everybody needs at some point to talk about what happened, especially, maybe right after it happened or as you're trying to figure out or before you've ever gotten validation that, yeah, that's a trauma, that's really hard. You deserve care about that. You should have had something better. So we all need that. There's a brain pathway when you talk about trauma that can set off the whole neurological dysregulation. James Pennebaker, University of Texas at Austin, has written about this. He's done a lot of research on it. Writing about, harsh things that happen in trauma is a way that you can get it out without having to re-trigger the language center of your brain, which is where, for whatever reason, it goes off. It's a calmer way to get it out. And when I've written something like that, I can then read it to somebody. And that's what my friend showed me. She was like, write your fears and resentments. This is a specific technique. So don't just go off what I'm saying in this video. Take the free course if you want to try it. But you write the distressing thoughts, and then you meditate, and then you read to somebody what they are. And that is a way that I can share with another person and get support if I want it about what happened without talking about it. But that really changes the game. And this is where my principles kick in. If you become a member and you join our secret Facebook group, we have one of our guidelines is go lightly with talking about what happened to you. We understand, but a lot of people's first instinct when they get into a healing community is, I just want to tell you what happened to me. And I understand that instinct, and it's what we were conditioned to do. It's what we were told would make us feel better. And if it does make you feel better, by all means, go do that, but not in our community. We're doing something. We can touch on it. You can say, well, I was abused as a kid. There was physical abuse. There was sexual abuse. You need not go into detail with us because most of us understand. And that way you're communicating what happened, and then what everybody's helping each other with is, and so today what I'm struggling with is trust or expressing myself or setting boundaries, normal problems that people with a traumatic past have. And in that we can talk and support each other and use tools together. And having a community of people to help you is very powerful. Now, I'm still talking about the problem with conventional treatment, and I just want to say medication. Medication can interfere with the natural inclination that people have to re-regulate when they get dysregulated. Everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. Most people eventually re-regulate. And what we do in my programs is we keep practicing that muscle of learning. Okay, there's my dysregulation symptoms, the cue, the thing I notice, it's happening. And then we use tools, we come back into re-regulation as quickly as possible. So the goal is to be regulated as much as possible, more, most of the time. Totally changes what happens in your life if you're regulated most of the time. A lot of things that you couldn't previously do, whatever it is for you, be at a party and act like yourself, have a relationship, try for a new job. Everybody has different thresholds of what they can do before they get dysregulated. Well, if you can stay regulated more of the time, the world is your oyster. You can do so many things. Because it's I'm kind of, I'm on a date, I'm getting really anxious. You can just go into the bathroom, use your tools, come back out. Nobody's the wiser that you were in there writing and, washing your hands in warm water to get your nervous system back online and grounded again, and go back out there and be yourself again. There's this huge flexibility. You could also work with a professional or a therapist, on something if you know how to regulate. And there are therapists who know about that. I think a lot of the tools that people teach for re-regulation, when they're tools that are espoused or created by people who don't have CPTSD, they're not powerful enough. That's all I'm saying, And so I pay particular attention to people who themselves have CPTSD to learn from. Medication, though, it's very imprecise for treating trauma. It has its applications for different mental health situations, but for complex PTSD, there's very low evidence that it helps, anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants. There's a reason why they give those things, but for CPTSD, it just doesn't do that much. We haven't found something that really hits that spot. The problem is that your natural ability to re-regulate and to work on that, I can just tell, like a lot of times when I'm working with coaching clients and they keep using the tools and they keep using the tools and they just can't get back. And I'm like, are you medicated by chance? And sometimes it's like weed or alcohol even. It could be that, but also prescribed drugs and, psychotropic drugs that are given can make it more difficult to re-regulate. Now, some people, they really can't stop taking, and I would not recommend that anybody just kind of make their own decision to get off. It has to be done with a doctor if that's your choice to do. And whether you do or don't take them, you can still use these tools, but if you're having trouble getting that breakthrough and getting back into a state of regulation, which you'll know when you feel it, it has a very pleasant feeling to it of like alert, calm, attentive. But if you can't get there, it could be that medication is interfering, and that's a longer term process, but I'm just saying there's a better way, okay? So the standard therapeutic modes of, when you go talk about what happened, talk about your traumatic stories, feel your feelings. If it's more likely to produce dysregulation than healing, we have a problem. Most insurance plans, they'll say, okay, you can go talk to a therapist 10 times. And it's like, you talk about your trauma, you're crying. And it would appear that you're not getting anywhere. Then they go, well, you better take medication. Now you just may have been cut off from the ability to get back your ability to re-regulate, to start working on that. So I feel that the system is broken. The system is misguided. It's not everybody in the system, but it is like the baseline of the system. And so as you're trying to get help for yourself, I just really encourage you to ask questions, do research, read, be willing to try things, experiment with them, but also listen to yourself. And if it doesn't give you a feeling like you're doing better, there should be a feeling of relief, like very quickly. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, this is going to take a long time. And you're like, I don't know, I'm just really going down. Yes, don't listen to that. It has to feel better. Maybe you can do deeper work that feels terrible to look at when you can stay regulated, but I would prioritize being able to stay regulated. Now, standard professional help cannot be relied upon to be the answer. It's cost prohibitive. It's wildly, not standardized, and it's also unproven. And people don't really talk about this, but studies show that when it comes to like how people are diagnosed, there's a lot of variation depending on who the practitioner is. When it comes to how people are treated, there's so much variation that researchers have concluded it's almost meaningless. So what I encourage you to look at is, what are your symptoms? People are always saying, well, I don't know, my childhood wasn't that bad, but I have all the symptoms. Can I come to your channel? Can I take your course? And I'm like, yes, we are about symptoms here. This like direct cause and effect, like my mom did this, therefore I have this. It's not true for everybody. Look at your siblings, right? Different kids in the same family have really different outcomes. Everybody's different. If you have these symptoms of dysregulation, then yes, use my techniques. If you're trying to get your life together because self-defeating behavior has gotten the better of you and you need to empower yourself to make a change, yes, these programs are for you. So, okay, next principle. Conventional beliefs about trauma have disempowered survivors. The power to heal exists in present time. I insist, the power to heal is in present time. And the only aspect of trauma that can be controlled is our own symptoms and what we do about them. Now, if you're actively in a situation that's traumatizing you, okay, yes, other people are involved. But this old therapeutic model urges us to give all the power away about that change by focusing on the past, on talking about things and relying on professionals to solve everything. And you know what? You get 1 hour a week with a professional, and really, have you ever felt like that was enough? And I just think professionals are perfect for advising, helping, guiding you between days where you've got your own tools, you're working on your own process. And I do think that that is so important. I get told from time to time, like there's thousands of therapists and doctors who refer their clients to Crappy Childhood Fairy and to take my courses, and they come themselves and they get coached. Like, this is for everybody, but there's a few professionals who find it very threatening that what we're doing is like self-empowering. We're teaching each other as peers, we're helping each other, we're serving as a community to each other. We're defining what it's like to have CPTSD, and we're helping each other understand what it is. And we're reading all the books that some of them are not reading, frankly. Nobody can read everything. And so we belong at the table talking about this. And we need to be focusing not only on the hurtful actions of others, but we need to be focusing on ourselves and assessing ourselves for the choices that we make that are perpetuating the harm of childhood trauma, both our own symptoms and then the way we treat other people. You know that saying, hurt people. And usually, people mean different things when they say that, but it's something we have to take very seriously. If we're not healing our trauma, we run the risk of hurting and traumatizing other people, certainly children, but also partners, coworkers, everybody in our path. Healing is so important. It's helping our health. It's helping the way we relate to other people. It's bringing about a sweetness in our lives. It's helping us earn the money we need to adequately support ourselves, which is really important. But because of this focus on the past, what happened, it's left generations of trauma survivors unhealed and locked into this identity as victims. And I understand, as a trauma survivor myself, yes, we are victims, in fact. What happened to us victimized us. Trauma is an injury, not an identity. And so it's just really proliferated in this generation, this identity. It's like, I'm a victim, that's all I am, you have to change so that I cannot be a victim. Well, it just never works. So even if that were fair, which sometimes it is, it's not going to happen. So if you're going to heal, if you're going to be an empowered person who makes a difference in the world in the way that you want to make a difference in the world, it's so important to heal your trauma, to learn to calm your triggers, to reduce the effect of triggers to make you dysregulated, disconnected, and in your self-defeating behavior. So the seventh principle is that healing complex PTSD requires taking your power back. That's your agency. Do you know that word, agency? It's your ability to lead your own life, to make changes, to affect the world. Now, once you own your healing, you no longer have to depend on fallible people and the healthcare system wherever you may live and the methods available to you. They may not be enough for you. You are less inclined when you're empowered like that to settle for stock answers that don't fit. Like the one that I'm always complaining about is how I got told, gosh, you keep making these, destructive choices, my self-defeating behavior. You must want to recreate your childhood. And I just always knew, no, I don't. I want desperately to have a better life, and I don't understand how I keep getting into this rut, and it's, now I know, it's neurological dysregulation. My brain was down, my feelings were up, I was making impulsive choices, and I couldn't understand how I got there. I was having trouble reading the situation. I had an attachment wound that was pushing me into relationships quickly and making it hard to leave because of the abandonment trauma that would come up in there. So, like so many people with trauma, I was stuck with this idea, this isn't helping me, it must be me. It just must be that I'm a defective person. You're not defective. The trauma symptoms I'm describing here are totally normal for people who were abused and neglected in childhood. Now we know. And you are the best judge of what helps you. So it's very important to stay at in the driver's seat of what you're doing in your healing. Confidence in yourself happens, it grows, it develops through courageous experimentation and a focus on identifying and healing the symptoms that you notice in yourself, and then changing your approach to life or the behaviors that are sabotaging you. And you can do this, and it feels great. Your self-esteem just goes when you make these changes and discover that you actually can. But it takes a shift of focus from the traditional way that people are viewing trauma. It's oh, it happened to you, talk about it, and then one day you'll feel better. That day just never came, not through that avenue. So though other people can support us, there's nobody else who can actually make the healing happen for us. Not therapists, not partners, not parents. So don't even wait for them to apologize. Parents almost never apologize. But even when they do, which is nice, it's not going to change that you now have a neurological injury. If you have CPTSD, the damage is there. It's in here now. And so to repair the relationship when that's possible is a lovely thing, but you still will have your symptoms until you learn to calm them. So that brings me to the 8th principle. And this is that character development is essential to healing. And in particular, character development is important for developing the ability to connect with other people. You know, if you have difficulty with boundaries, if you tend to lash out, these are totally common symptoms, right? But they push people away. And so they harm your ability to connect. I've never met a person who has complex PTSD who didn't struggle in some of these ways to connect with other people. And the thing is, not only do you need some healing to have healthy connections with people, but you need some kind of connection with people to heal. And I always say, this is like, I was so sad when I realized this, because I would like to believe that everything in life I can do by myself. But I can't heal trauma by myself. It's a relational wound, and much of it is healed by practicing connecting with other people. So even if your ability to connect with other people is kind of like rickety and has ouchies in it, you know, you just have to keep trying in a titrated way. I have this course called Connection Boot Camp you can take if you want to learn a system, a 30-day program to start practicing that. And then overall, I have a class called Healing Childhood PTSD, which is a great place to start. So most complex PTSD symptoms that we're experiencing today are caused not by the original trauma. And this is, you know, I keep saying this, original trauma did it. We can't change that part. But that original trauma has led to some self-defeating behaviors, and those are causing us to re-traumatize ourselves. Now, it's still not your fault, especially when it's first happening, but I'm here sort of like ruining that innocence in you where you can say, I didn't know, because now you know. Your self-defeating behaviors are reactivating your trauma, are pushing people away. That, you know, the loss of someone you love who rejects you, who breaks up with you or stops being friends with you, or you lose a job, like that's devastating to a person with CPTSD. It's hard for anybody, but that's why it's so important to learn these things, and why making a little change here and a little change there, it really starts to build so that you can maintain good relationships all around, or, you know, start to improve them. It's a process, right? But you start to improve them, and then those good relationships give you more strength for the next move you're making in your healing. Character development is not taught in most dysfunctional homes. It's barely taught in schools, and most therapist offices don't teach it. You know, I have a friend who was getting a PhD as a therapist, and they learn ethics. And ethics, I said, well, what do you learn? And it was mainly like, don't sleep with your clients. And there was very, very limited, you know, you can't give advice to people, and you can't just tell them, hey, stop sleeping with married men. That's what's great. Like Crappy Childhood Fairy, I can say, hey, stop doing it. It's going to make you miserable. It's morally wrong. It's going to make your life unhappy. It's going to gut your ability to have a good relationship. I'll just be in your face. But that's character development, you know, discerning what's right, what's wrong. That's so important to your healing. And that's a lot of what we got robbed of growing up. You know, if your parents were drunk, high, you know, fighting all the time, mentally ill, absent, you didn't get that moral education on like, how do you be a fine, upstanding person? But you're not going to be happy until you are. Like everybody's coded with that desire. And trauma can kind of drive it out of you and make you kind of try to find other ways to get your needs met, but it will never work. You need to be a good person, and you need to be yourself. Those are the two ingredients of being really fulfilled and really happy. And being fully yourself includes bringing your gifts to bear in the world. So there's a fear around addressing self-defeating behaviors because people confuse that with blaming the victim. And every time I talk about self-defeating behaviors, someone in the comments will go, you're just blaming the victim. You're just shaming people. But I'm not. You know, believe me, everybody's walking around feeling the shame anyway of what maybe they did wrong and a whole bunch of other stuff that they didn't do. Now, the 12-step model is one example of the centrality of moral reckoning in healing. The point of healing isn't just to feel better, but to become the person that you can be. And that is all about clearing up the mistakes that you've made, the way you've harmed others. Complex PTSD suppresses and oppresses your true nature. And you risk losing forever the opportunity to express who you are if you don't heal. So on a large scale, complex PTSD robs the entire world of the loving and talented and creative person you are, of the participation of so many people who are right now, repressed under their trauma. They cannot bring it right now. And we are all suffering as a result. When you look out at the world and you're like, something's missing, it should be better than this, we've got to make it a better world. Well, who's missing? Like about 7% of the population who is suppressed under trauma right now. Trauma is part of who we are. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be part of our story forever. But healing the symptoms allows us to simultaneously accept what happened and then to transcend it, to become who we were always meant to be, which now includes your greatness as well as your history, your trauma. So many, many great men and women have had traumatic pasts. Trauma hurt them, but it didn't define them. In fact, it informed them, it deepened them, and it empowered them to have compassion and to be motivated to make a difference in the world. Now, true happiness requires that we develop and use our gifts to bring to the world what we're capable of bringing. And then having done that, to create conditions where everybody has the opportunity to develop their gifts. That is a full and happy and meaningful life, and I hope you'll take it to heart.